Maya Alvarez woke before her alarm because the desert sunrise was already in her mind. She had planned the weekend for weeks, a simple 2-night camping trip with her cousin Jonah in Utah's Red Rock country. She wanted a calm break after a busy month, time to stand in a narrow canyon and hear wind in the stone. She checked her list again. Water jugs, first aid kit, paper map and compass, headlamps with fresh batteries, a bright red dry bag for important items, and snacks that would not melt. She added a small whistle on a cord because it was light and simple and made her feel prepared. She copied their route onto a sheet of paper and took a photo of it on her phone, even though she knew service might be weak. Jonah arrived on time. He was steady and liked clean gear. He checked tire pressure, topped off gas, and studied the paper map. He traced the route, a turnoff from the highway, a graded dirt road to a trailhead, then a walking path into a quiet slot canyon. He added extra water and tucked Maya's tiny voice recorder next to the camera, saying he liked the idea of bringing home the canyon's voice. They loaded the car with easy teamwork and set off at dawn. The road opened across country that looked older than time. Mesas rose in the distance, sagebrush dotted pale soil, and the sky felt wider with each mile. They talked about family news and soon the plan itself. Set up camp, make a first walk into the slot, avoid tight places if the weather changed, and return before dark. They agreed to leave clear notes on the dashboard so anyone could see where they had gone and when they expected to be back. By late morning, they reached the last paved turnoff. The dirt road hummed under the tires and curled toward a high sandstone ridge. At the trailhead, they found level ground and set up the tent, anchoring it with small rocks because the soil was thin. A signboard warned hikers to check weather and be careful in narrow spaces if storms were possible. Maya read it slowly and took a photo. The sky was a clean blue, and still they chose to move with care. They walked toward the Slot Canyon Inn, mid-afternoon with small day packs. The path ran over flat rock and dropped into a sandy wash. The walls rose as they walked, warm to the touch and colored like layers of sunset. The air inside was cooler, and their footsteps echoed softly. At one turn, the walls drew so close they had to pass in single file, leaning and laughing as their shoulders brushed the stone. Maya recorded the sound of a tiny trickle left by an earlier storm. Jonah pointed out a chalk stone wedged high above, like a careful doorstop placed by time. He said it was a reminder that water could move through this place quickly, and they should keep an eye on the sky. Change came gently. A breeze moved against the walls, and the temperature fell a little sooner than they expected. Jonah looked west and saw a faint stripe of cloud far away. The canyon was still quiet. "We keep our plan," he said. "We turn around at the next big bend." At that bend, the canyon opened into a small chamber with a smooth floor and a high alcove like a balcony. They stopped for water and a snack. Maya tucked the whistle and recorder into the red dry bag. Jonah put a small dot on the map and wrote the time. It calmed him to mark their place in simple pencil. On the way back, the blue strip of sky turned pale gray. The breeze found a soft push that came and went, like someone slowly opening and closing a door. They kept a steady pace and spoke little, listening for any sound that did not belong. When they reached a squeeze between walls, they paused and looked at one another, calm and careful. "One step at a time," Jonah said. They reached the trailhead about an hour before sunset. The wind was stronger and carried a scent of dust and far rain. They made tea on a small stove, ate a simple dinner, and wrote down the time they planned to leave in the morning. They set their phones to airplane mode to save battery and put the paper map where they could reach it in the dark. At night, the first drops tapped against the rainfly, then stopped. Stars appeared between thin bands of cloud. Jonah checked the guy lines and pegs. Maya placed the red dry bag in a safe corner of the tent. They talked a little about home and then fell asleep. After midnight, wind brushed the tent and woke them. A low roll of sound moved across the land like a soft drum far away. The rain returned, steady but not heavy. In quiet voices, they agreed to avoid the Slot Canyon if rain stayed in the forecast. Morning came with a bright edge and thin cloud. The world smelled fresh, like clean stone. They made oatmeal and decided on a short walk to an overlook instead of another canyon visit. Maya left a note on the dashboard. Short hike to overlook, back by 1 p.m. They started with light packs. The path rose over smooth, slick rock and crossed shallow channels that carried water only during larger storms. The sky shifted between pale sun and high cloud. From a low dome, they could see miles of broken land cut by narrow lines that hinted at hidden spaces. The slot they had walked the day before looked like a pencil mark. They took a few photos, enjoyed the quiet, and turned back, pleased with their simple choice. At the trailhead, the wind was stronger again. Dust walked across the flats in thin veils. They packed the car but decided to wait before driving the dirt road because the low spots looked damp. They read, ate, watched the sky, and rested. Heavy. Clouds stayed at a distance like a dark curtain someone might or might not pull. Mid-afternoon, the wind eased. If they left now, the washboards on the road would be easier. If they stayed, they could take a short, simple walk along the open wash near camp to stretch their legs. They chose the walk and left a fresh note on the dashboard. Short walk along wash, back by 4 p.m. The wash was wide and open, the walls low and the light soft. They walked a little farther, then a little farther still, following a bend that promised a broader view of the ridge. They talked about how the land taught quiet lessons, how a leaning plant could point to a wind, how a pale crust of soil asked for a gentle step, how a line of rounded stones told the story of water. They did not notice at first that a thin thread of water in the center had begun to move, a quiet line that slipped around pebbles and made a faint new sound. Jonah stopped and listened. He looked at the moving thread of water and then at a side path that climbed toward firm rock. "Let's turn back now," he said in a calm voice. "We keep to high ground." Maya nodded. They moved with purpose but did not rush. Clear steps, they liked to say, were faster than quick, careless ones. They climbed from the wash and headed back the way they had come, watching the sky and listening to the land's soft messages. The breeze cooled, then warmed, then cooled again. The light shifted a shade toward evening. When they reached the car, the wind had turned cool and steady. The dirt road looked darker at the low spots, and they did not want to risk a slow, muddy patch in fading light. They chose patience over hurry. They ate an early dinner and packed what they could so they would be ready at first light. Maya wrote another note and placed it on the dashboard. "If we drive out after 6 p.m., we'll text when we have service." The simple plan felt right. As the sun lowered, long shadows crossed the camp and made the rocks look taller. They checked the sky one last time. The clouds in the west gathered into a deeper color, but the wind eased again, and the air grew quiet. In that calm hour, they trusted the care they had shown all day. It still felt like an ordinary trip with ordinary choices, the kind of day that lingers softly in a person's memory. When they did not arrive home on Sunday evening, Maya's sister noticed first. She looked at the group chat and saw no new message. She told herself it might be a delay and called Maya's phone. The call went to voicemail. She tried Jonah's phone and got the same. She waited one more hour, called again, and then called the county sheriff's office. She calmly explained the plan Maya had sent, the note on the dashboard, the trailhead location, and the time they had expected to be back. Near midnight, a deputy drove past the trailhead and saw their car parked where the map said it would be. He called in the details and left a notice on the windshield. At first light, searchers arrived, quiet, focused people who knew how to read the land. The maze of canyons stretched in every direction, full of turns that looked like one another and pockets of silence where sound settled and stayed. The new day began with hope and a careful plan. No one knew yet that the next clue would be a sound too soft to notice unless you were listening for it. The first morning of the search began quiet and careful. A small team parked by the trailhead before sunrise. They studied the note on the dashboard and the map that the family had shared. They checked radios, water, and first aid kits. Then, they moved out in pairs toward the wash and the slot, following the same simple paths Maya and Jonah had walked only a day before. The air smelled like wet stone. The sand showed soft marks from wind and a light sprinkle of rain in the night. But no clear footprints. It felt like the land had pressed reset. By mid-morning, more helpers arrived. A local hiking club brought bright tape and notebooks. A rancher stopped by with coffee and kind words. A member of the county search team reminded everyone to speak in calm voices and to write down what they saw. He said the desert was large but not cruel. It simply asked people to read it with care. He set up a whiteboard near the cars and drew a simple map with big arrows and time boxes, so no one would cover the same ground twice by mistake. That first day they found small things that could be signs, or could be nothing. A water bottle, of the same brand Maya used, but it looked older and sun-faded. A section of the wash where sand was compact and smooth, as if two people had rested there. A shallow print that could have been a boot or just a rock's old shadow. The team marked each spot, took photos, and kept moving. When the sun grew strong, they returned to the trailhead to share notes and plan the next steps. By evening, the family reached the site. They brought a cooler with fruit, bread, and simple snacks. Maya's sister stood a little apart and stared at the sky, then came to the whiteboard and listened. She kept her voice even. She shared the route plan again, the times on the last two notes, and a list of what gear was in the car and what gear was with them. Everyone thanked her for the clear details. They promised to search again at first light. The second day, a team with a small drone surveyed the wider wash. They flew it low and slow, recording the ground in thin stripes. At the same time, two pairs walked into the slot. They moved one at a time through narrow places and spoke softly to test how sound carried. The slot was cool and patient, holding, light the way a bowl holds water. The team reached the alcove where Maya and Jonah had rested. They found a few crumbs, a twist tie, and a tiny smooth chip of red plastic. It could have been from their dry bag. It could have been from someone else. They put it in a clear bag and wrote the time. On the third day, a volunteer who knew the area well led a loop across the open rock toward the overlook. He liked to say that missing people often chose the right thing: higher ground, more open sky, a path that let them think and plan. They found no bright color, no fabric, no simple note tucked under a rock. They found only the easy facts of the land. A white flower that follows the sun, a shallow pool left by rain, round stones that whisper the direction water prefers. The formal search continued for a week. Then the number of people slowly went down. The county team explained the plan to the family with kind honesty. They would keep the case open. They would follow tips. They would call when new resources were available. In the meantime, they encouraged hikers, ranchers, drivers, and campers to watch, listen, and share anything that seemed even a little helpful. The family did not let the case turn into a quiet file. They made a simple website with a timeline, a map, and photos of Maya and Jonah smiling in ordinary light. They started a small social page where people shared kind thoughts and practical ideas. Which canyons hold water longer? Which road dips collect mud after storms? Which ranch gates are sometimes open for travelers who need help? They printed flyers and left them at trailheads, gas stations, and grocery stores in nearby towns. They kept their words simple and hopeful. Weeks became months. The season changed. In fall, light came in at a sharper angle and the air was clear from dawn to dusk. A group of friends walked in pairs every Sunday, checking side canyons they had marked on a list. In winter, snow traced thin lines along the tops of the walls, and the land looked like it had been drawn with white chalk. Only a few people could hike then, but those who could sent photos and notes. In spring, flowers appeared between stones and gave the land a softer face. People came back with fresh energy. They checked the same places again because sometimes a second look sees what the first look missed. A number of tips came in. One driver remembered seeing two hikers near a bus stop weeks after the trip. It was not the right weekend. One camper thought they heard a whistle during a windy night. It might have been a bird. A ranch worker said a pair had once asked for water, but the month was off by a whole season. Each tip was treated with respect, written down, and checked. Each one, for the moment, led nowhere. The family learned how to live and search at the same time. They set one evening a week as Quiet Hour, where they would light a candle, say the names aloud, and write one paragraph about something good they had seen or done that week. It kept hope from becoming heavy. They also learned the small language of the desert from the people who loved it. They learned how sound can carry far through a slot and then suddenly stop at a bend. They learned how wind can make a wire sing, how a bottle in a crack can whistle, how a tent pole can tap. They did not know yet how important those lessons. After the first year, the social page grew quieter. People still cared, but the world had new stories every day. A few faithful hikers kept going out. A small radio club set up once a month near the trailhead, not to call for anyone, but to practice setting a network in rough country. They liked to say, "We prepare on simple days so we can help on hard days." The family brought cookies, said thank you, and went home with lighter hearts. The second year passed much the same. A new county map showed more detail in the swell. The family traced it and saw again how many places a person could wait out a storm, how many gullies could pull you to a bend that looked like another bend, how many small paths could carry you toward open land if you chose the right one. They met a retired teacher who had hiked the area for decades. She told them a story about leaving a note in a dry bag under a rock once to help a friend catch up to her on a long loop. The details stayed with them. A note, a bag, a place where wind could reach. They tucked it away like a tiny bead of light. On the third summer, a visiting scientist arrived with a small team. Dr. Aaron Cho studied how sound moves in canyons and how that sound can tell us about the place itself. She was mapping echo patterns for a wildlife project, learning how different shapes carry bat calls and bird songs. She was patient, careful, and good at listening. Her team had 2 students, soft-spoken and curious, and a set of small sensors, simple, boxes with microphones and batteries that could record for days. They met the county coordinator to get a permit and to hear about the land's habits. He told them about sudden storms, loose rock, and narrow bends where air can act like an invisible instrument. He also told them gently about the case that lived quietly in many minds. He did not ask them to look for anything. He did ask them to write down anything that felt like more than just wind. Erin promised to do that. She wrote the names in her notebook so she would remember them when she looked at a map. The team set up a base at a simple campsite near the trailhead. They placed sensors in 3 kinds of spaces: an open wash, a mid-width corridor, and a very narrow slot with a chalk stone wedged high like a cork. They fixed each sensor to a rock with soft straps, made a quick sketch, and noted the time. They did not leave food or bright fabric. They kept the land tidy the way they would keep a friend's home tidy. During the day, they walked and measured. In the evening, they cooked simple meals and went through notes. They replayed short clips of daytime sounds: footsteps, a raven's call, wind across a branch. Erin taught her students how to look at a spectrogram, the picture of sound, and see shapes that repeat. She told them that patterns are the first hint that a place is trying to tell you something. She also told them that not all patterns are important, but almost all deserve a second look. On the third dawn, before the sun reached the canyon floor, Erin woke early. The air was still cool. She made tea and checked the overnight recordings on a small screen. Most of the night was a soft wash of wind with brief lines that looked like bird calls. Then, near the hour when light begins to think about returning, she saw something she did not expect. It was a thin, even mark that repeated about once a minute. It did not look like a bird or an insect. It did not look like a branch moving. It looked like a tiny tone, patient and steady, like a small whistle being breathed by the stone itself. She played the clip through a small speaker. The sound was almost too quiet to hear unless the room was still, but it was there, a small note that came and went on a schedule. She played it again with headphones and listened to the way it faded in and out, stronger when the overnight breeze had increased, softer when the air was still. She read the label on the file. Slot Sensor 2, Narrow Bend, 4:17-4:53 a.m. She drew a star next to it in her notebook. Erin did not jump to ideas. She made a list. First, check for equipment noise. Second, check for loose wire or strap tapping a rock. Third, check for a bottle or tube that could create a tone in the wind. Fourth, compare the same hour on the other sensors to see if the pattern appeared there too. Erin did not rush to share the late-night clip. She wanted to be sure. At dawn, she and her two students walked to the narrow slot where the sensor had recorded the thin, steady tone. The canyon was cool, and the first light touched the top, edges like soft gold paint. They stood still and listened with their own ears. Wind moved slowly, almost shy. They heard the ordinary sounds first, a raven far off, a pebble settling, the hush of air sliding along stone. Then came the small note again. It was faint, like a whisper across a bottle's mouth. It rose for a breath, then faded, and then, after almost the same amount of time, rose again. They checked the sensor for loose parts. Nothing was rubbing, nothing was tapping. The straps were snug. The wires were not touching rock. They took the sensor off the wall, and the tone still came and went. They stepped 5 paces upstream. The tone softened. They stepped 5 paces downstream. The tone grew stronger. They made a quick sketch on a small waterproof card. Stronger here, softer there. Erin explained a simple idea in simple words. If a sound is louder in one spot than another, she said, we can follow that change like we follow a trail. Louder is like a brighter arrow. They set a second sensor farther down the slot and let both record for 20 minutes. The tone kept its pattern. It was not fast. It was patient, almost polite. It waited for the small breaths of wind that walked through the narrow bend. It seemed to live just past a chalkstone lodged high in the slot, like a cork in a bottle, but with gaps around it where air could slip through. Erin drew the chalkstone and marked the place where the sound felt fullest, as if the canyon itself was pointing a finger. Back at camp, they laid the new recordings next to the first. The shapes looked like a picket fence, thin lines evenly spaced, each one a little taller when the wind grew. Erin tapped her pencil next to the pattern and said, almost to herself, "Not random." She did not say more. She only underlined a timestamp, 4:41 a.m. They returned to the slot with a small, safe test. Erin did not want to bring anything that would add a new sound and confuse the picture. She had a simple plan. She stood in one place and made a soft, single clap once every 10 seconds. The students walked slowly, one to each side, and listened to how the clap echoed. In a tight bend, echoes can tell you about hidden shapes. Here, the clap came back as a quick, short reply. The bend was close, like a hallway corner. The steady tone, though, felt like it came from behind that corner, from a small space they could not see. "Let's do a quiet map," Erin said. They drew a thin line along the floor to show where they had walked. They marked where the tone swelled like a small tide and where it thinned again. It grew stronger near a narrow crack below the chalkstone. The crack was no bigger than a hand. It was not safe to squeeze through. The stone felt stable, but they respected it. They also respected the story that might live on the other side. At noon, Erin called the county coordinator. She spoke calmly and chose clear words. She explained the pattern, the repeat, the location, and the way the tone changed with the breeze. She did not make guesses. She did not say what she hoped. She only said that the sound felt like a human-made tone, maybe from a small object, and that the loudest spot was just beyond a jammed rock in a narrow bend. The coordinator listened. He knew the case that lived in people's minds. He said thank you for the careful work and asked for the GPS point and the sketch. He said he would visit with a small team in the morning. That evening, the wind moved, in long, slow breaths, and the tone kept its patient rhythm. Erin and her students sat by their notebooks and wrote down each step. They also wrote down how they felt, because feelings help people make good choices the next day. They felt steady. They felt hopeful in a careful way. They slept lightly and woke early. The coordinator arrived with 2 search team members and a deputy. They brought ropes, helmets, a pole with a small camera at the end, a short flexible scope with a light, and a gentle grabber that looked like long scissors. They spoke with quiet care and reviewed the plan. Safety first. No rushing, no moving the chalkstone. If they could see behind it without touching it, they would. If they saw anything that looked like a note or a bag, they would try to reach it with the grabber. If they found anything important, they would record the time and take photos before moving it. They walked into the slot together. The air was cool. In the narrow place, sound felt close to the skin. When they reached the bend, everyone went still. The tone rose and faded like a small breath. The team set the pole camera and guided it upward and around the chalkstone. The small screen showed a tight, shadowed pocket no wider than a backpack. Sand lay in the bottom like brown sugar. A thin, bent metal tube lay against the stone. Next to it was a tiny shape that looked like a whistle. And under both, a corner of bright red fabric showed through dust. They watched in silence for a full minute. On the screen, the bent tube moved a little when the breeze reached it through some hidden slit. The whistle touched the tube and made the soft tone. It was a small, clear answer to the sound puzzle. But the red corner was the real arrow. The coordinator nodded once. He did not say anything dramatic. He only said, "Let's try to see more." They eased the pole camera lower and tilted the light to reduce glare. The red corner belonged to a dry bag, the kind people use to keep water out. It looked wedged, but not stuck forever. The chalkstone's shape had left a slim path at one side, just big enough for the soft grabber. The team measured angles with their eyes and their hands. Then they backed away, took a breath, and returned with slow, careful motions. The deputy filmed with a small body camera so they would have a record of each step. One team member used the flexible scope to keep an eye on the bag, while the other guided the long grabber past the chalkstone. The space was like a keyhole inside. A keyhole. Twice the grabber's tip bumped the stone and had to come back out. On the third try, the tip found a loop at the top of the bag. The person holding the tool closed the jaws and felt a soft hold. "Gentle," the coordinator said. No one moved their feet. The air in the slot held its own breath. Bit by bit, the bag shifted. Sand hissed as it moved aside. The bent tube and whistle slid a finger's width and went silent for the first time that morning. The bag's red fabric came into view, then more of it, like a small flag coming around a corner. The grabber held. The hands holding the grabber did not shake. A foot slid a little for balance and stopped on solid rock. Another small pull, and the bag slipped free. They did not open it at once. They set it on a flat stone and let everyone look. It was a bright red dry bag with a roll top and a black clip. Dust covered it in a thin coat. The coordinator took photos, then asked the deputy to note the time. Erin stepped back. She wanted the search team to lead now. The coordinator put on clean gloves and unrolled the top. A little sand fell out. He eased the opening wide. Inside were 4 things. The first was a small notebook in a clear plastic sleeve, with a pencil tied to it by a string. The second was a hand-drawn map on waterproof paper, folded into thirds. The third was a tiny voice recorder with a removable memory card taped to it. The fourth was a silver whistle tied with cord to a short, bent tent pole, the same pole they had seen through the camera. The whistle had a few grains of sand in it. The tent pole had a smooth scrape where it had touched stone again and again. The coordinator did not touch anything else. He lifted each item just enough to take photos and then set it back down. He read the first page of the notebook. The pencil writing was small and clear. The date at the top was 3 summers ago, 2 days after the weekend Maya and Jonah had left. The first line said, "We are okay for now." The page explained, in calm words, that sudden water had filled the slot downstream, so they took shelter in a high alcove. They ate in small amounts, saved their energy, and waited for a break in the weather. When the water dropped, they made a simple plan to leave a marker and go east toward open country and a service road. They made the whistle device so wind could make a sound that others might hear. They set the dry bag in this pocket because it was high and dry and safe from water. The second page was shorter. It said they would try to follow an old sheep trail toward a ranch house marked on an old map they had seen in a guidebook. They wrote that one of them had seen a small windmill in the far distance and believed it was near the ranch. They promised to leave notes if they could. At the bottom, they wrote their names, slowly and clearly, and the time of day. The last line was simple. Still okay. Going now. No one spoke for a moment. The slot felt even quieter than before. The deputy looked at the coordinator. The coordinator nodded and turned to Aaron. "Your careful listening brought us here," he said. "Thank you." Aaron felt both warm and steady. She said she was grateful to help and that she understood the next steps were official steps. They placed the notebook and map in clean bags. They powered off the recorder and set it aside for later review in a quiet room. The whistle and tent pole went into a separate bag. The coordinator called the office to share a short update. Items found, likely connected to the case, all secured. He asked for a contact number for the family and said he would speak with them in person as soon as he returned to town. He did not share details, OCE even and kind. Before they left, Aaron walked. The next morning began with a simple plan and steady hands. The coordinator laid the hand-drawn map on the hood of the truck and smoothed the edges. Aaron and her students stood beside him, pencils ready. The map showed a dotted line from the narrow slot to a faint trail, then across low ridges toward a small drawing of a windmill. Farther to the right, a square marked ranch. It was not a long map, but it felt full of choices. The coordinator split the work into 2 paths. One team would follow the map on foot from the slot, looking for the sheep trail and the windmill. Another would drive the long way around on ranch roads to see which gates were open and which turns matched the notes. Aaron joined the walking team. She wanted to move at the same speed as the people who had drawn the map. They started at first light, when the rock was cool and shadows were long. The air was clear. The slot behind them was quiet now, as if the canyon had said what it needed to say and could rest. The ground ahead was a mix of slick rock and shallow soil with small plants that asked for soft feet. Aaron kept her steps mindful, and so did the students. They looked for subtle signs, a faint line in the crust where feet might have passed, a small stack of stones that could be a marker, a place where someone might have paused for shade. 3 years is a long time, but sometimes a choice leaves a shape that stays. They found the first clue sooner than expected. On the lee side of a low ledge, under a small overhang that kept off wind and rain, there was a short line of tiny stones. Laid in an arrow, it did not look like a random scatter. The stones were a little cleaner where they had touched one another, as if they had been placed by a careful hand and had stayed mostly still. The arrow pointed east-northeast, the same direction the dotted line on the map suggested. Aaron sketched the ledge and marked the arrow's angle with a compass. The students smiled without speaking. The team moved on with renewed attention, like readers turning a page. By mid-morning, the land began to look similar in every direction. Low ridges, repeated washes braided, and the horizon held a dozen windmill shapes, some real and some only plants catching the light. This was the first near miss. One student, seeing a tall windmill to the southeast, offered to angle that way. The metal flashed and looked close, but the map's dotted line did not slant that direction. It held steady east. The coordinator unfolded a county topo and showed how distance plays tricks in clear air. "We keep faith with the map," he said in a kind voice. Aaron agreed. They adjusted their hats, took water, and stayed with the bearing. The sheep trail appeared like a shy path at first, a slightly smoother ribbon in the crust where hooves over many seasons had chosen the same line. It crossed a shallow saddle, between low humps of rock, and then dipped into a wide, open flat. From there, the windmill on the true bearing finally showed itself. It was smaller than the bright one to the south and did not flash. A few vanes were missing, but the silhouette matched the small drawing on the map, a modest head, a thin tower, and a round tank beside it like a coin on its edge. The team felt a quiet lift. They kept their pace steady. Good news does not mean you run. At the windmill, they found simple proof that people had been there. On the tank's shady side, someone had drawn a tiny water drop with the tip of a pebble and written OK beside it. It was faint, but real. Under the tank rim, protected from rain, a small note had been tucked between two bolts. The paper was fragile, but the line, "We passed here," could still be read, along with a date from 3 summers ago. The names were smudged by time, but the letters began with M and J. The coordinator photographed the note without pulling it free. He did not need to hold it to believe it. The team stood silent for a moment. The windmill creaked gently, and a single blade turned. They checked the ground around the tank for other signs. There was a place where someone had likely sat with a back against the metal. The sand there was smoother than the rest, like a small seat. A circle of tiny pebbles looked like it had once bordered a compact cooking spot, but nothing remained that would harm the land. The students measured a simple bearing from the tank toward the next mark on the map. Gate. The line pointed across a shallow wash and up a low slope where posts, gray with age, made a broken row. When they reached the old fence, they saw a gate that swung between 2 posts with wire hinges. A flat stone on the ground nearby held a faded mark. "A" scratched lightly into its chalky face. This could have been the end of the breadcrumb trail. But the land offered one more puzzle first. The walking team followed the fence east and came to a place where 2 ranch roads met and split again. One curved north around a knoll, smoother and more used. The other continued east but looked washed, in 2 low spots by recent storms. The easy choice was north. The map, simple as it was, seemed to say east. The coordinator called the driving team on the radio. The signal was thin and only partly clear. "North Road, passable. No house yet," came the reply in pieces. Aaron looked up at the sky. A small line of cloud stood like a fence picket on the horizon, but no storm pressed near. They had time to think. They made a simple test. Aaron sent a student 50 paces north on the easier road and asked him to look for new signs, recent tire marks, fresh footprints, a ribbon or tag someone might have left for a later return. The student walked, watched, and returned with a small shrug. The road had life, but not recent, not clear. Aaron then walked 30 paces east on the rougher road and stopped at the first wash. On the far side, in the wet sand under a lip that had kept off sun and wind, she saw 2 shallow heel marks. The edges were softened by time, but the shape still spoke. Next to them, a small circle had been drawn with a fingertip in the damp sand. 3 years ago, it would have been damp, like someone had marked a pause. That was enough. They chose east, moving slowly through each low spot, stepping on firm places, treating the land with care. The day grew warmer. The team adjusted their pace and took longer shade breaks in the slim shadows of lone rocks. They kept speaking in calm voices. When they crested a small rise, the ranch came into view at last. A low house with a metal roof, a line of cottonwoods along a thin stream, a square corral, and a pair of tanks that caught the sky. It was neither grand nor poor. It was a working place, tidy and quiet. A dog barked once and then stopped. The walking team smiled without showing teeth, a small habit of kindness around animals. They kept their hands visible and their steps easy as they approached the gate. No one appeared at first. The house door was closed. A note was pinned to a post. Back by 3. It was only one word different from back by 4 on a dashboard. 3 years earlier, but it made Aaron's chest feel warm. They waited by the gate in the shade and radioed the driving team, who were now heading in from a different road. The coordinator wrote the time on his pad. A dust trail rose on the far side of the field, and a small truck rattled in with 2 people inside, an older man with a sun-creased face and a woman about the same age, both wearing broad hats. The dog barked once and then wagged. The older man opened the gate and waved them in. His voice was gentle from the first word. When he heard why they had come, his face changed in a quiet way, like a person who remembers a piece of a song. He asked them to sit under the cottonwoods. He brought water in clean glasses and a plate of crackers. He listened to the story from the beginning, from the slot to the windmill to the gate. When he heard the names, he nodded slowly. He said, "We helped a pair that summer after a big storm. Tired, polite, carrying almost nothing. I gave them water and bread. My wife made tea. The phone lines were down that day, and the small office in town was closed for a holiday. We drove them to the bus stop on the highway because they said they could reach family from there." He paused, thinking, counting back. "I wrote it in the log, but I think I spelled a name wrong. I'm not proud of that. I wrote quick that day." He went inside and brought out a stack of spiral notebooks, each marked with a year on the cover. He flicked to the summer pages with a practiced hand. The writing was simple and neat. On the date that matched the notebook from the dry bag, there. It was 2 hikers, safe, storm delay, water, bread, ride to bus stop, names, M. Alvarez, J. Reed, bus southbound. The misspelling was small, but real. Aaron felt a small ache at such a tiny gap, holding such a large silence for so long. The coordinator took a photo, thanked the couple, and asked a few careful follow-ups. Which bus stop? What time? Did they remember any more details? The woman remembered a smile and a "thank you" said twice. The man remembered the shoes, dusty but not broken. They drove together to the bus stop. The platform was simple, a sign, a bench, and a shade. It looked like every other stop on that long road. The older man pointed to the exact spot where he had dropped the pair. "We watched the bus arrive," he said, "and we saw them get on. The driver waved. We went home." Aaron looked at the road and felt the long line that ran from the slot, to the windmill, to the gate, to this bench. The line was straight now, not broken. The coordinator called the office and asked for old bus logs. He also called the small office in town. A clerk there, new to the job but eager to help, said she would check old paper reports for any record that had never reached the case file. There was one more near miss before the day ended. The bus company's first reply listed no riders by those names. The coordinator met the family the next morning in a quiet room with soft chairs and a pitcher of water on the table. He brought the red dry bag, now cleaned on the outside but still full of careful notes and calm handwriting. He spoke slowly, giving the story in a simple line. The patient tone in the narrow slot, the camera on a pole, the whistle tied to a bent tent pole, the notebook in a plastic sleeve, the hand-drawn map, the windmill, the ranch, the bus stop, the log with 2 names spelled almost right. He did not rush. He let each piece sit for a moment so it could be real in their minds. He placed the notebook on a clean cloth and opened to the page that began, "We are okay for now." The family read in silence. The words were steady and kind, even in a hard time. The last line, "Still okay, going now," made the room feel warmer, like a light had been turned on after a long, dim hour. Maya's sister pressed a tissue to the corner of her eye and nodded. She was not crying hard. She was breathing in a new way. The coordinator said there was more. He had not played the voice recorder yet. He wanted the family to hear it first. He set the small device on the table and connected it to a simple speaker. He kept the volume low. A little rustle came first, then the soft hum of wind moving in a curve, then 2 voices, level and clear. "It's morning," a woman said. "We're in the high alcove. We can see a bright line of sky. We're okay." A man spoke next. "Water is fine. Food is small but enough. When the water drops, we'll leave a marker and walk east to open ground. If someone finds this, thank you." They did not complain. They did not speak in fear. They spoke like people who cared for each other and for the ones who would one day listen. The family leaned closer to the tiny sound, then looked up, calmer than they had been in years. The coordinator stopped the clip and let quiet return. He explained the last pieces. The ranch couple remembered the 2 hikers. They gave water and bread, drove them to the bus, and wrote it in a log. The bus company, on a second search with corrected spellings, found 2 tickets to the same town named in the ranch note. The small office in that town had a short report from that week. 2 hikers assisted after storm. Safe. Moving on. The names were almost right there, too. Almost was enough to lose the connection for 3 years. With those records linked at last, the line from canyon to bus bench was now complete. "What happens now?" Maya's sister asked, soft and practical. The coordinator had already started the next step. Quiet calls, 1 careful check at a time. The bus company gave the destination. The town office found a hostel ledger with 2 first names and dates. The hostel owner remembered that the pair left the next day, planning to catch a second bus. A clerk at a community center nearby recalled 2 travelers who spent an afternoon using the public computers to send emails and check maps. She still had the center's old sign-in book. 2 first names were written there, neat and slow, and a note, "Emailed family, no reply, will try again when phones work." The story of the gap began to show itself in small, ordinary facts. The storm had damaged lines for a day. The phone that carried all the family numbers had stopped working after hours in wet air. It would not charge. The paper with backups was in the bottom of a pack that had fallen into a shallow pool. The ink had blurred. At the community center, they used a good-hearted memory to type an email address that was off by 1 letter. The message did not bounce. It simply went to a quiet inbox no one checked. They mailed a postcard to a P.O. box that had recently changed, and the postal slip never found the new box. By the time they reached a bigger town, they had decided the county would contact the family through the route plan they left on the dashboard, and the family would be waiting at home. They were tired, they were safe. They chose to finish the trip as planned and return the long way by bus across several stops. The long way turned into a longer way. A job offer came through. A friend of a friend, short-term work that would cover bills. It was supposed to be 2 months. It became a season. They sent a second email from another shared computer to the same address, thinking it was right. They did not use social media much, and they did not see the search page. The county case never received the ranch log or the small town report, because the names did not match and the forms did not cross the right desk that summer. A string of nearly rights made 3 years of not knowing. When the coordinator placed all these notes together and made the last calls, the community center clerk found one more line in her old book, a volunteer's contact with a forwarding email address written for one of the travelers. She sent a short, polite message. "County is looking to close a case. Please contact." An answer came back the same day from a new address with a simple subject. "We are here." A time for a call was set that evening. The screen lit up at the sheriff's office after sunset. The family sat side by side. The coordinator pressed the button and then stepped back so faces could see faces first. There they were, 2 familiar smiles, a little older at the edges but clear. The room breathed out as one. No big speech was needed. The words were simple and true. "We're okay," Maya said. "We are sorry for the gap," Jonah said. They explained the chain of small errors. The phone that would not charge, the email typed from memory, the postcard that never met the right box, the 2 months that became a season, then a year. The family explained their side, the open case, the quiet hours, the notes on the whiteboard at the trailhead, the long patience. There were tears, but they were gentle ones that cooled the air. They planned to come back as soon as possible to close the loop in person. They would visit the ranch, thank the couple who had given bread and water, and stand at the bus bench where a simple wave had once happened. They would walk, with permission and care, to the rim where the narrow slot could be seen from above, not to step into it again, but to say thank you to the place where careful planning, patience, and a small whistle had kept a message safe. The days that followed were full of tidy work. The county corrected spellings in the case, linked the ranch log, the bus records, and the small-town report, and marked the case resolved, subjects located safe. They also used the chance to improve their process. They built a simple check-in system for backcountry travelers that did not rely only on paper on a dashboard. Hikers could now register a route with contact names and 2 ways to reach each person. A simple code on a sticker could link a found car at a trailhead to the trip plan. A friendly sign at popular trailheads explained how to leave visible notes for others and where to tuck a dry bag if a message must stay in the land for a while. The hiking club added their own lesson to the community board. Leave stones for others. They explained how an arrow of small rocks under a ledge can last longer than a footnote in sand, how a scratch on a flat stone near a gate can show a safe direction, and how a water tank's shady side can protect a short line of words from sun and rain. None of this replaced calling for help. It was only extra kindness for the next person who might need a hand. Erin, back at camp with her students, packed the sensors and wrote a short report for her project. The first line of the methods section gained a new sentence. Attend to small, steady signals. They may be messages. She did not treat the canyon like a mystery to solve. She treated it like a neighbor with a soft voice. She also shared a simple guide with the county. How to use low-cost sensors to listen safely in narrow spaces, how to compare patterns, how to rule out equipment noise, and how to follow a sound the way one follows a shadow. Her students laughed, softly when she wrote the last line of her field notebook. A tiny tone can carry a long way if someone is willing to hear it. When Maya and Jonah came back, the meeting at the sheriff's office was quiet and warm. There were no cameras, no big speeches. The family brought a small plant for the front desk and a box of cookies for the search team. The coordinator placed the red, dry bag on the table between them. "Yours," he said. Maya held it for a long moment, thumb on the rolled edge. Jonah lifted the notebook and smiled at the pencil tied to a string. "This helped," he said. "We hoped it might." They listened to the short voice clip one more time, not because they needed proof, but because the sound of calm voices in a hard place can teach anyone how to breathe. They drove out together to the ranch. The dog barked once and then wagged. The older couple came to the gate like old friends. There were handshakes and kind words and a simple lunch under the cottonwoods. They drove to the bus stop and stood by the bench in the shade. The driver on duty waved at the small group and said, "Nice day." It was. On the last morning, they walked with permission to a high rim where the narrow slot below drew a thin line across the land. They did not go down. They stood above and watched light move along the stone. Jonah set the silver whistle on the rock beside him for a moment, then put it back in the bag. "We needed help," he said, and help came, even if it took time. Maya added, "And our small plan did what we hoped it would do." Back in town, the coordinator closed the last page of the case file with a neat note that said, "Resolved with lessons shared." The family's social page posted a final update in simple language. "Thank you for every kind word, every Sunday walk, every careful eye. We have answers now. We also have a new way to help others. If you hear a small, steady sound in a